These sailors suddenly saw something very strange in the South Pacific, but it was already too late. The world's oceans are unique places. They're full of weird creatures and items, from long-lost civilizations and shipwrecks to the most bizarre, alien-like creatures in the depths of the deep blue seas. But there's a lot to marvel at in the oceans all over the world. But for one crew, it was what they found on top of the water that confused and amazed them, and that proved to be a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. In August 2006, a Swedish sailor called Fredrik Fransson had decided to go on holiday to a cluster of islands called the Vava'u Island Group, which is located in the South Pacific. Vava'u is a group of more than 40 islands in Tonga, about 250 kilometers or 150 miles north of Tongatapu. They are either raised coral limestone or coral atolls. The Swedish man had always loved sailing and would often go out on his boat back on his country's lakes and seas. But with a new ocean laid out before him, Fredrik simply couldn't resist the idea of sailing out into the Pacific Ocean to see what amazing new sights he could find. However, he never would have expected the situation that he found himself in a million years. The morning of the man's first sailing adventure had finally arrived, and he was incredibly excited to get started. After getting ready and completing his morning routine, Fredrik headed down to the harbor to find the boat that he would be sailing on for the day. It wasn't long before he found the medium-sized boat called the Mayken in the harbor, and it was only a short time later that the rest of his crew arrived. Once they were all ready, Fredrik and his crew got on board the Mayken and set sail. At first, everything was perfectly normal. The sea was quite calm that day, with small waves, and the sun was blazing in a clear blue sky. Fredrik couldn't believe his luck. He couldn't have asked for a better day to sail. However, only 5 miles or 8 kilometers from the shore, Fredrik noticed something incredibly strange happening in the water. Instead of the deep, sapphire-like blue color that the ocean always was, it had started to turn a weird greenish color, much like the color of a lagoon. Curious about what could be causing such a drastic change in the ocean, Fredrik and his crew decided to sail a bit further on to see if they could notice anything out of the ordinary. And they weren't disappointed. Only a few moments later, Fredrik noticed brown-colored grainy particles floating on the ocean's surface. As they continued to move forward, the grainy particles grew in density to an extent that the crew could no longer see any water ahead. Instead, it looked as if they had sailed straight out of the ocean and into a desert. "We looked out, and in front of us it was as if there was no more sea," Fredrik recalled. "It was like the Sahara, with rolling hills of sand as far as the eye could see." Fascinated by the phenomenon that was happening all around them, Fredrik and his crew decided that they wanted to try and sail as far as they could through the weird sand-like surface to see if they could discover where it had come from. The Mayken and its crew were able to sail for a little bit longer, but as the density of the particles that floated on the surface of the ocean kept increasing, the boat started slowing down. Eventually, it had to be turned back around and redirected to open water again, for fear that it would become stuck in the middle of the strange mass. Once out of the stony area, Fredrik and the rest of the crew decided to follow alongside the strange phenomenon and trace it back to its source. What they discovered amazed them to no end. Often in the South Pacific, you have clouds on the horizon, but this time there was one that stood out, Fredrik said in an interview. "Then we saw a black pillar shooting up into the air, and we understood that it had to be a volcano." Fredrik and his shipmate cautiously navigated toward the smoke and close to the active volcano. They checked their navigational chart to see whereabouts in the ocean they were compared to other land masses. But instead of seeing an island on the map, they discovered that they were actually supposed to be near an underwater seamount, which is like an underwater volcano called Home Reef. However, what they found was something much more interesting. It turned out that Fredrik and his friend had found an island growing one explosion at a time. It was kind of a smoldering, smoky stuff. It looked like coal, and then there was an eruption. We could see the new material piling up on it, said Fredrik. As the two men watched the 240-foot tall or 75-meter volcano rising from the sea, generating more landmass with each explosion, they couldn't help but be fascinated by what they were witnessing. They were witnessing the birth of an island. The volcano, as Frederick's friend and crew member Håkon Larsson remembered, was 1 mile or 1.6 kilometers in diameter, and it had 4 peaks and a central crater smoking with steam. Then, every once in a while, it would burst with a fierce boom and spew lava and ashes high into the sky and into the ocean. But even though Frederick and his friend found the volcano, they still didn't know what the weird stones floating on the sea's surface were. But after a little bit of research, they soon realized what it was. It turned out that the sea of floating stones was actually a byproduct from the volcano called pumice. Pumice is a volcanic rock that consists of highly porous, rough textured volcanic glass. It is created when superheated, high-pressurized rock is violently ejected from a volcano. The unusual foamy texture of pumice happens because of simultaneous rapid cooling and rapid depressurization. The depressurization creates bubbles by lowering the solubility of gases that are dissolved in the lava, causing the gases to rapidly get bigger. The simultaneous cooling and depressurization freeze the bubbles, which makes the stone able to float due to all of the air bubbles. After finally returning to shore, Frederick posted his find online, and it ended up drawing a lot of attention from scientists. This is because even though undersea eruptions are not an uncommon occurrence, they usually take place at such deep depths that scientists aren't able to observe them. What made Frederick's discovery so unique was that the volcano was actively rising from the ocean and forming a new island, something that has rarely been seen before. Greg Vaughn, a geologist that worked with NASA, said, "We decided right then that we needed to get in there and get some satellite data." NASA used its technology to capture a bird's-eye view of the new island. By doing this, researchers were able to gauge the temperature of the water around the volcano, along with being able to track the trail of pumice. This was the first time they had been able to study a forming island from space. Volcanologist Scott Bryan was eager to travel out to the island. However, by the time that he was able to make the journey, he was disappointed by what he saw. The island had almost been washed away. Ultimately, it's a battle between the frequency and volume of eruptions and the wave action taking it back down to sea level, said Bryan. Volcanoes that spew true lava often form more sturdy land which can withstand the crash of the waves, while islands made of mostly pumice, stone, and ash are quickly washed away by the sea waves. Sadly, it turned out that the island Frederick found was mostly made of the pumice material, which meant that it didn't last long. While it's sad that Frederick's Island is no longer around, it was an amazing discovery that will last with him forever. Isn't it crazy how incredible the world is and how it continues to amaze us? Let me know what you thought of this video in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for even more awesome stories. And if you can't wait for new videos, just head over to my channel where you'll find even more awesome videos.